Hello and welcome to the Movement Prescription Podcast. Today, we've got an episode about moving through cancer. I'm Callum, I'm your host, and I've got two guests. Firstly, Kat Fraser-Harris. Kat is a practicing physio just outside of Edinburgh. And she's recently been documenting her journey, having been diagnosed with sarcoma, and as a physical activity enthusiast, has been showing how she's been moving through her treatment to try and support and inspire others. And we've also got Lucy Gossage. Lucy is a practicing consultant oncologist with a PhD in renal cancer and was formerly a professional triathlete, a 14-time Ironman champion, and now a pretty handy ultra runner. The conversation is fairly wide-ranging. It's powerful and emotive as Kat shares her journey. And there's loads of practical and helpful tips in there as they both talk about their experiences as practitioners. I really hope you enjoy, and please do share your thoughts. Kat, I wonder if I can start by asking you a question.
Yeah.
Really just wondering if you might be able to share a bit about your journey with sarcoma and how you've been documenting your physical activity through your treatment.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Last July, after a run, actually, very fittingly with movement, I noticed a lump just below my knee immediately, and it was a bit odd. But being a physio, I tried to physio my way out of it and figure out what it was. Asked a few of my healthcare professional friends, GPs and things, and then by September decided I should probably go to the GP to double check it because I couldn't figure out what it was. Went to GP, got referred down the sarcoma pathway, had an MRI 2 days before I ran Lisbon Marathon. And then that came back as maybe a hemangioma, nothing to worry about. Got referred for an ultrasound-guided biopsy, went for that, and didn't get a biopsy because the radiologist said it definitely looks like a lipoma, but because it's sitting right on top of your hamstring tendon, let's get it out non-urgently. Luckily, didn't have to wait that long, got it out in December, and then a month later got my biopsy results back, and it was a myxoid liposarcoma. So that was a bit of a shock to everybody. I think nobody suspected it was that. And then since then, I've had 25 sessions of radiotherapy, and then I had a month's rest, and then I had surgery to remove more tissue below my knee, including quite a lot of my medial muscular support for my knee, tendons, nerve, and then relocated my medial head of gastroc to fill the hole and a skin graft on top. So that's a little summary of my cancer bit. Early on in my journey, I went to a talk at Maggie's at the Western General, which was mainly run by Professor Anna Campbell, who's done loads of research into movement and cancer. And it was really interesting and just confirmed what I already think, in that movement is amazing and good for everything. There was really compelling evidence that it's really positive to do, reduce your risk of recurrence, reduce your side effects, everything like that of treatment. So that just confirmed to me that I should keep moving. My brain went into overdrive as a physio. I was thinking, when shall I move? What type of movement shall I do? Loads of questions. Most of them weren't really answered by my medical team. They said, just move. So what I wanted to do is start to document my journey and kind of encourage other people to move, because as a physio, movement is so positive anyway. But if it can have such big effects on your kind of cancer journey and symptoms and reduce the risk of getting it back, why wouldn't you move? And why wouldn't I want to get people moving? So hopefully as a inspiration for people. And when you have a diagnosis, I don't know, I initially looked for blame. I was like, what have I done wrong? What have I eaten wrong? I don't smoke. I don't drink very much. I exercise. I ran 2 marathons last year. So just showing that it doesn't discriminate, but you can continue to move as a positive to help you through. Yeah, so kind of why I am exercising and how it can help. That's how I'm documenting it on Instagram.
Thanks, Kat. It's super inspirational. Can you tell listeners what your Instagram handle is?
Yeah, it's Moving Through Cancer.
Perfect. So, yeah, give Kat a follow. It's really amazing. It's quite must be quite vulnerable experience as well, sharing these things. But you're doing an amazing job.
Yeah, there's certain bits, but I think because I've always moved through my life, it's everyone says it's inspirational, but it just feels normal to me, and it's a way to kind of hold on to normality in a situation where you don't have control over some quite big things happening in your life.
One of the things you mentioned was being told just to move and kind of a lack of clarity around that. And hopefully we can kind of unpick that a bit more as we go on. But I think that's been something that resonates with me, is kind of a lack of, possibly on the other side of the fence, a lack of comfort in knowing what to say for certain conditions. And that was the original inspiration for this podcast, really, was to try and address that. Lucy, just kind of over to you briefly. Could you tell us a bit about how you got involved in Move Against Cancer and how your athletic background has influenced what you do? For those that are listening, for context, Lucy is appropriately dressed. She's in sunglasses and a vest, having just been to the gym. So I feel inadequate. I'm in a jumper.
So I'm an oncologist, and I did have quite a lot of time out actually as a professional triathlete, kind of during my registrar training. And I guess whilst I was kind of away, I became aware that there was quite a lot of evidence accumulating that exercise was a positive thing for people living with and after cancer. And I remember it really clearly. It was probably 2017, I think. I was still a registrar, and I went to see a young patient on the ward. He was probably 21, 22. I hadn't treated him. He just needed a prescription. We got chatting, and he'd had a really rare brain tumour, a germ cell tumour, testicular tumour in his brain. And he'd theoretically been cured of the cancer. But in the process, he'd put on several stone in weight. He'd lost most of his friends. He'd lost his job, and he was spending all day asleep and all night awake playing computer games. And I remember so clearly walking away from the ward, and I'd had all this time out thinking, what are we doing if our cure rates for people with cancer are so much better, yet this is the life that they're left with. And I'd always loved parkrun, and I just thought, I wonder whether we could get a group of young people who've had their cancer treatment together to build up to doing a parkrun in 3 months' time. And kind of, and I guess I had a friend who'd been depressed, and I'd seen how exercise had helped them. So those were kind of the cogs that were churning. And touted this idea in the hospital. Everyone was like, no way, Lucy, just because you love running, people with cancer aren't going to want to be told to run. And I just thought, you know what, I do believe there's something in this. So I looked elsewhere, and I came across Gemma Hillier-Moses, who is an amazing person. She'd had cancer when she was 25. She was a runner, and she'd just founded Move Charity with the goal of providing other young people with the support to be active, which she didn't get through her cancer treatment. So I got in touch with Gemma. We had a coffee. We started talking. We realised we both shared the same vision. And Gemma didn't say, no, the parkrun idea is nonsense. She said, well, let's just give it a go. So that led to the founding of 5K Your Way Move Against Cancer, which is now one arm of Move Against Cancer charity. So it's a really simple idea. We have over 105 groups, I think, now across the UK and Ireland. We meet at Parkrun on the last Saturday of every month. Each group's led by a volunteer ambassador who's been impacted by cancer in some way. And people walk, jog, run, cheer, volunteer, and have a catch-up and a coffee over a catch-up and a chat over a coffee. So it's an active support group with a difference. This is all part of Move Against Cancer charity, which is a small but mighty charity, is how I describe it. And our aim is to support, inspire, and empower people living with and after cancer to be active, because we believe that movement matters, but actually the evidence now also shows that movement matters. And I feel very passionately as a doctor that the evidence is enough now that every person who receives a cancer diagnosis should be told that exercise is one of the things that they can do to help themselves. And at the moment, that's not really happening. But yeah, that was kind of how I got involved in Move Against Cancer. Spent a huge amount of time, kind of from 2018 to 2022, spending 2 days a week helping to grow it. But we've now got, I'm now much more in the background, and yeah, it's doing some amazing stuff.
Oh, cool. Yeah, it's really incredible. And yeah, we'll put some show notes with a link to Move Against Cancer in the podcast. Lucy, you mentioned about the accumulating evidence. One of the things that certainly prompted this podcast was there was a really interesting paper that was released about colorectal cancer and the role of exercise, and it was all over the news, and it is great that it's getting quite wide exposure. But I was wondering if you could explain some of the science behind how physical activity and movement benefit people living with cancer.
So I think the reality is we don't really understand how it helps, but we know that it does help. And there are lots of different theories. I was really excited by that study. So I've done loads of conference talks over the last kind of 8 years. And I've always said, this is what we know. And I think if I do this talk in 10 years' time, we'll have high quality data from phase 3, big randomized trials that prove that exercise improves survival. And then finally, we've got this study which proves just that. So until recently, we've known for sure that exercise is the best treatment for cancer fatigue, which is a massive thing for so many people, not just during their cancer treatment, but after their cancer treatment and for people living with cancer. We've known that it improves mood, reduces depression and anxiety. We've known that it makes people feel better. We know that it improves health-related quality of life. So those were all proven. But there was also a lot of accumulating evidence, though not really definitive proof, that it likely improved how well cancer treatments worked, reduced side effects from cancer treatment, definitely reduced the long-term consequences of cancer treatment, particularly for people living with cancer that's probably not curable. But there was a huge proportion of people who are living very, very many years with really good quality of life, having ongoing cancer treatment. So we know exercise mitigates a lot of the toxicities from that, particularly cardiovascular and metabolic. And what's been amazing over the last few months is the publication of the Challenge trial, which was a big trial of nearly 900 people who'd had treatment for bowel cancer. So they'd had surgery and then chemotherapy. And they were randomized either to get generic advice around exercise or to get specialized support to be active for the 3 years after their cancer treatment. And it showed that the risks of recurrence in the group that were randomized to the supervised exercise was significantly lower than the group that were just given generic advice. So it's the first definitive proof we have that exercise interventions reduce the risk of recurrence. So for me, for someone who's lived and breathed this for the last kind of 8 years or whatever, to finally have the proof and be able to say to other healthcare professionals, look, there's a study, yes, it's just in bowel cancer, but there's no reason why that shouldn't be replicated for other cancers. Surely this has to change the conversations that you have with your patients, is really powerful. And it was great. It was all over mainstream news. It does seem to have fizzled out. And I think my worry is that with the challenges with funding, et cetera, in the NHS, that it's not going to translate into the big changes that it should do. Because actually, if you've got a study that proves that the benefits of exercise are as good as the benefits of chemotherapy, that should be funded. And anyone who says people with cancer won't want to be told to exercise, I would turn that on its head and say, people with cancer turn up to get chemotherapy once a week that makes them lose their hair, that makes them feel sick, that has potentially lifelong consequences on fertility, on cardiovascular health. To so many people with cancer, exercising would be, and it should never be an alternative to chemotherapy. It should be an add-on. So I'm very clear it's not an alternative. But I think a very significant proportion of people with cancer would want to be told that exercise was something they can do to help themselves. Plus, we know it makes people feel better. But it's easy to say that. We need to work out, and it's easy for people like me and Kat who love exercise. It's a massive part of our lives. I know for people for whom exercise hasn't been part of their life, it's a really big thing and it's a challenge. And that's why the study, I guess, showed that you need supervision and you need structured support and guidance. It's not just enough to give someone a leaflet. But yeah, it's really exciting.
Yeah, it's cool. And that reframing is really interesting of how we kind of repackage physical activity within cancer. Yeah, hopefully there's loads to come and we can continue to use that kind of capture the public imagination about the role of physical activity. But you're right, it's maybe disappointing that messaging was quite short term. Kat, Lucy mentioned a few of the many challenges, not least the fatigue with cancer. What have been your personal challenges and motivators to date so far? And I suspect there'll be new ones to come as well.
Yeah. Well, fatigue was top of my list. So for me, it was initially when I had my diagnosis, I didn't sleep very well. I woke up pretty early every morning. So I was generally quite tired. I run quite tired anyway. I think I run on full pelt all the time. So I am quite tired. But also side effects of radiotherapy and just the emotional fatigue as well of a diagnosis and kind of a change in your life. And plus I'm a mum of 2 small kids, so I have that fatigue as well. So a few different fatigues, not all cancer related. Time as well for me. I'm self-employed, so I kept working throughout all my radiotherapy and in between radiotherapy and surgery, and then went back to clinic 3 weeks after my surgery, which was maybe a bit soon. But so time, the hospital was an hour away and there were horrendous roadworks for most of my radiotherapy. So it just took a big chunk out of your day and a long time in the car. And again, 2 small kids and still doing school, drop off, pick up, everything like that. So time got in the way. That was a challenge. And then more latterly, physical challenges. So post-surgery, I've had quite extensive surgery to my leg. I can't move how I used to move. I still can't walk fully properly. Like my muscle strength is different. So those physical challenges as well are there. I normally run, play tennis, walk the dog, go swimming. So everything like that I wasn't able to do for a while. So that was a big challenge in terms of trying to keep moving. But the motivators I had were, as Lucy said, about all the evidence. If that evidence is there, why wouldn't I be exercising? Like for me, it's an absolute no-brainer. Like if it's going to help reduce my recurrence, if it's going to help with my fatigue and everything like that, then there's not really any other option other than to move. Also, if I see other people doing it as well, I'm like, well, they're actually in a similar situation to me and they're moving too. So why can't I? I should move as well. And knowing, as Lucy said, we both love exercise. I know if I'm feeling a bit tired and get up and move, I will feel less tired. So in normal life, before cancer and things anyway, I'd move to help with fatigue. So again, knowing that it would make me feel better helped. And also role modeling for my kids as well. I think that's a big part of exercise for me anyway. It's normal for them to see me and my husband going out for a tennis match or a cricket match or something, and they're like, okay, have fun. So knowing that actually you can kind of, if you have these challenges, you can treat them with exercise. I think exercise is very much my drug. So that's a motivator for me. I know it helps. I know it helps pre-cancer, and the evidence is there that it helps during and after as well. And even though now I'm restricted to going on a bike, which is fun still, and doing my rehab, I still feel better after I've done those. So yeah, it's a no-brainer just to keep moving, and that's the motivator there.
Can I just jump in on what you said? If exercise is your drug, and it is a cliche, but actually, if you had a pill that did everything that exercise did in one package that you could take once a day, you would, at the cost that exercise costs, you would give it to every single person, probably every single person in the world, but certainly every single person with a cancer diagnosis. So it is a cliche, but if exercise was a drug and that study, the challenge trial had been a study of a drug, it would be fast tracked through NICE, the drug approval process for fast track approval, which is why I feel so passionately that it has to trigger changes in the healthcare system. So,
and it's the fact that I would go into radiotherapy waiting room in my shorts, having gone for a run with my friends who've taken me there because, again, I just wanted to keep moving. And most people were sitting there looking exhausted, like obviously a big range of people, but nobody else was doing that. And I'm like, come on, guys, you need to move, even if it's just simple things. But the evidence is there all across the board for loads of different conditions, not just cancer. Like as a physio, we treat osteoarthritis, all these things, but people would rather take a drug to try and treat symptoms when actually movement can reverse lots of other things too.
And I think there is a barrier that sadly there's still a hierarchy in the NHS, and a lot of patients need to hear it from their consultant before they'll believe it. So whilst it's really sad, I think the conversations have to start with the consultants. And there is still a perception, it is changing, but there's still a perception that the best thing you can do if you've got cancer is rest. And I think one of the most important things to do, particularly for less fit patients who've been given a cancer diagnosis, is at the very least dispel the myth that rest is best, because it's not. So if all you're going to do is give people permission to move, that's better than just ignoring it, because so many people otherwise, particularly the loved ones of the person who's got a cancer diagnosis, will assume that cancer means that you need to rest, and actually the evidence is completely opposite.
Yeah, and I spoke to I spoke to the radiotherapist every day I was there, but I'd always have a question to ask them, and I was asking them about what's the evidence for exercise. Should I exercise before my treatment, after my treatment? And one of them had been there for a while, and she said it used to be that we tell all our patients to go home and rest for the rest of the day. But now it is changing, and it's getting there. And it's just like physio for back pain. We used to tell people to rest, and now it's all about moving.
So there's an interesting, there was an interesting animal study where if they put mice on a treadmill, basically they made mice exercise before their radiotherapy, the responses to the radiotherapy were better. And there's this theory that exercise, just a short burst just before your radiotherapy opens up all the blood vessels. So it means that the impact of the radiotherapy can be more powerful. So that's not definitive proof, but there is kind of some evidence that actually exercising just before your radiotherapy might be a positive thing. But certainly it's very unlikely to do you harm if you feel well enough to do it.
You mentioned role modeling, Kat, but to the kids, but you're also super cool. You're role modeling to other patients as well, and setting an inspiration and example. You mentioned social support, and I think that ties in closely to what Lucy mentioned earlier around 5K Your Way. How have you found, or have you managed and found much social support for moving in your cancer? And then maybe once you've answered that, Lucy, you can tell us a bit more about how you've kind of managed to integrate that within 5K Your Way and move against cancer.
Yeah, well, I've always found having sort of support around you really important. And I've, over the last few years, swapped to being much more of a social runner, and I prefer running with my friends rather than on my own. I think the trouble with being up in Scotland is everything is a wee bit smaller, and there were the 5K Your Way were at the talk I went to at Maggie's, but they're only based at 2 parkruns in Scotland. So it's a bit more tricky.
At the moment,
yeah. It's a bit more tricky to access that. But I found like the support of my friends who I exercise with anyway, that was amazing. And it changes exercise because you're doing it for a social thing, but you can offload to them. You're running with them, and the chats that you have when you're running get quite deep. And it makes you feel better. It's really that more mental side of things that you feel better physically after doing exercise. But if you've had a really good talk with somebody as well, it really helps the kind of mental side too. I've connected with quite a lot of people now through my social media with cycling, because I'm doing Chris Hoy's Tour de Four cycle in September. And that's been really good, and it's been really inspirational for me too, because having that community there to connect with, even though it's virtually, seeing people going through lots of horrible things, but moving and enjoying it and things. And then it gives you even more motivation as a cancer patient to get out and move.
I was going to ask you briefly if you could tell us a little bit more about Tour de Hoy.
Tour de Four.
Tour de Four. Sorry, Tour de Four. It's Chris Hoy. I'm getting all confused. Yeah,
it's a cycling event. So I'm doing the second longest route. So there's a 50-something mile cycle, a 30-something mile cycle, and then there's a 1 kilometer loop you can do as many times as you want. And then there's also static bikes and other things for people who aren't able to cycle. And it's organised by Chris Hoy, who obviously had his stage 4 cancer diagnosis, to raise awareness of stage 4 cancer. But I think the part of the main message is that stage 4 cancer diagnosis doesn't mean stop like that is the end, you can't do anything. I think it's trying to show that people, you can keep moving, and the positivity of exercise. So it's been really good for me as well, because I think, like I said before, I haven't been able to walk very far or run, but I can get on a bike. So I'm now going whole hog on a bike. Started on my turbo and now going out. But it also brings in the community side, because 4 of my friends have signed up. So we've been able to go out and cycle together. But I'm quite looking forward to it. It looks like a really good event.
And community is such a core part of
exactly
of sustainable interventions. And Lucy, kind of Move Against Cancer and 5K Your Way, that definitely integrates community. And you mentioned earlier about going for coffee and chatting. Is that been an intentional thing, or is that something that's kind of grown organically, that community?
I guess a bit of both, really. I mean, the Nottingham group, which is where we started it back in 2018, so it's 7 years now, and we've got people who came to the first one who still come, and their cancer for them is in the past. We've got people who've been living with stage 4 cancer since 2018. We've had people that have sadly died, but we've got people that have become lifelong friends through that community, and it's like any active intervention, sport is a real leveler. And we've got they call themselves the Nottingham Grannies, and then they're in their 70s and 80s, and they're absolutely crazy. And they walk a little bit. Sometimes they walk the whole thing. And we've actually just recently got 2 young guys in their 20s who've just finished their cancer treatment, for whom actually walking 5K is a massive thing. Like, it's not something they could ever imagine doing just 3 months ago. And it's incredible. I think each time I go, because I don't really need to be there anymore. It runs without me. But I go and I just come away full of, can't even articulate it, just the magic of community. And I think everyone that has got the guts to turn up at a new group aimed at people impacted by cancer are all people who are looking for silver linings. And that's part of the magic of this community, that everyone there has faced adversity, yet has found ways and is actively looking for ways to overcome that adversity. And some of the friendships and it's just really magical. And seeing the grannies support the 20-year-olds from completely different backgrounds is, it's hard to describe just how special it is. But I think one of the powers of kind of group supports is that actually the friendships form, and then, like any sports group, people that are then go out and be active away from the group. So you don't need to stay part of whichever sports group it is. You might just dip in a couple of times, and then it gives you the confidence to go and be active on your own. And it's not, obviously I see the Nottingham group, but watching groups around the country who've been going for some time and seeing their camaraderie and the friendships is really special. So yes, of course it is about the exercise, but it's just as much about the friendships and the camaraderie. And I think people that are part of the group would say something along the lines of it's just being nice, being around people who get it. I think that's what those 2 20-year-olds said to me. They'd told me in clinic they wanted to meet other people who had been through similar, and that was a way that they could. And the grannies would probably say exactly the same.
I think just touching on that, it's so true. It's like with lots of experience in life, you can't fully understand it if you haven't been through it. So everyone, all the people that you love and things, are trying to support you, but unless they've been through something, they don't 100% know the extra bits of it, how you're feeling and stuff. Whereas connecting with people who are in a similar situation is really reassuring, and it's really positive.
And I think it's also really nice for the family. So Debs, who now runs the Nottingham group, quite an incredible lady. But she came down when she was going through her chemotherapy, and she brought her whole family with her. And she said it's something that we can all do together and be part of that. And we've got people whose partners have died from cancer who still come down because of that community. So it is yeah, it's something the family can get involved with. And we've got the daughter of one of the ladies that's been coming since the start. The daughter's now a teenager. She was a little girl back at the start. But yeah, I just think physical activity groups, whether they're for people with cancer or just, for anybody, do accelerate friendships to some extent. And for people who understand cancer for whatever reason, it's just a safe space for them to kind of talk and share, but not have those awkward silences that you're getting sitting having a crappy cup of tea in a support group.
And a lot of that speaks into the kind of the mental resilience, and also I think community. A lot of the communication that I find I'm giving or inclined to give is around the physical benefits of physical activity. I'm not sure how well that sits, how well it kind of lands. I think if we were to, or I try now and emphasize more the short-term benefits, and I hope that it offers a bit more encouragement and possibly kind of more longevity in outcome by emphasizing the kind of short-term community and well-being aspects of moving.
But I think it's scary. Like, even for someone like me with all my sporting background, I would be nervous about turning up at a running group, and I'd have the same fears. Am I quick enough? Am I all those stuff. So for someone who's never had any experience of exercise, to turn up at a group that's aimed at exercises is really, like, I just think it's so brave. Those people that turn up on their own, and we've got a charity that does group exercise classes in Nottingham. And again, you see the same that you get with 5K Your Way, these friendships that are formed from doing these circuits in the gym. But yeah, how you have the conversation to give people enough confidence to actually turn up is really challenging. And I guess that goes a little bit about the messaging that goes along with, exercise interventions and exercise. The word exercise can be quite off-putting for a lot of people, whereas movement might be a little bit less off-putting. I think my background, it still is a big barrier for me, because people assume, like they did 8 years ago, just because you love running, not everyone with cancer is, and they assume, it's going to be a running race. And exercise is very different to different people. But one of the things we were saying when you were offline was, I think everyone who does find the courage to join a support group or an exercise group is the kind of person who's looking for a silver lining. And that's why those communities are so special. But the challenge is, how do we get the people who aren't kind of classically silver lining hunters, how do we get them to find those support networks as well?
I think there's also a bit of a stigma around exercise, like you were saying. It's scary, and people are like, I'm going to do a park run, I probably should make sure I can run a bit. And that's the study that came out recently. What I liked about it as well is it's like, no, you don't have to go and do a HIIT workout or run a marathon or run. You can walk. You can, so like you say, it's movement rather than exercise. So selling that side of thing or sport, because that can put people off. They're like, I don't do sport. I can't hit a ball. I can't run. I can't do that. So I can't do it. I won't do it. Whereas if you can be like, you just need to walk to the end of the road and back. Like, that's a start. It needs to be little, like, bits at a time and small goals, and not to scare people off, because everybody can walk. If you've walked into an appointment, you can walk a short distance.
Yeah, and a 45-minute brisk walk, which is kind of the intervention that a lot of people in the study were doing, that is still a massive challenge for a lot of people who've never exercised. But you don't need to start with a 45-minute walk. You can start with a 2-minute walk and back, and then you can build it really gradually, but people need that support. And I think that's what the study showed. They need the support to do that.
For health professionals listening and kind of coming back to what you said earlier, Kat, about people not really knowing what to say and what advice to give, with both of your experiences, what could we say? What would be good things to say? And maybe from even a personal perspective, Kat, what would you have liked to have heard?
I probably would have quite liked to have heard a lot more. I think I'm quite different, though, probably compared to a lot of the lay population, like Lucy was saying. I'm not a professional athlete like Lucy was, but my level of exercising before my cancer diagnosis was quite a lot. So I wanted to know, like, can I continue? Is it safe to do so? But also I want to know about timing of exercise, like we were saying with the radiotherapy treatment. When should I exercise around my treatment to get the best effectiveness out of treatment? But I think a lay person who doesn't exercise would probably have quite different questions to me and want to know different things. I think knowing the evidence would be really useful. Just simple things like the list that Lucy did about how it can reduce fatigue, reduce anxiety, depression, all those things, and the strength of the evidence as well, because there's a lot of good, strong evidence out there. I think that, and maybe I think signposting as well would be really good, because there are lots of community groups. I had no signposting with my diagnosis, but I found quite a lot myself, especially as a younger person with social media. There's charities for people in their 20s, 30s, 40s with cancer that provide free 12-week programs with a cancer exercise specialist. So there's actually quite a lot out there, but it's about signposting people to the right things for them, if that makes sense. Because I did so much digging myself, because I think my way of dealing with my diagnosis was, what can I control? I can control what goes into my body and how I move. So I looked into nutrition and things, but also looked into timing of exercise, what type of exercise. And I'm lucky as a physio that I knew I was going to be having surgery to remove certain bits of my anatomy, and knew what those muscles do and what I could do as prehab myself. But I think it's a bit of a postcode lottery as well in terms of physio with cancer, because I know where we are, there's no physios as part of the sarcoma team. Lucy and I were chatting about this, and it has quite a big impact on you physically, dependent on where the sarcoma is. And if you're not given the advice on how to move afterwards, or how to get back to moving, you're not going to move, and then you're missing out on all the benefits of exercise.
A lot of that, it feels like you kind of needed more time and space, which is a challenge in the NHS, isn't it? A perpetual one. But yeah. But a lot of what you says, it kind of makes a lot of sense, doesn't it? And I'm sorry your experience was what it was.
Well, I'm lucky though. I think I've said I'm unlucky in one way, but I'm lucky. There's a lot of, I think I'm definitely a silver lining person. There's a lot of glitter on my situation, in that I have that knowledge. I've got physio friends, I've got doctor friends, I've got a really good community to support me through, and I'm very much of the belief that knowledge is power. So my kind of coping mechanism is to start reading into things. What's the evidence? What can I do to help myself? Whereas I think a lot more people are quite passive, and they'd be in the same situation and be less active than they were before, which might not have been very active in the first place.
How about you, Lucy? Any thoughts on what health professionals can do to support people with cancer to move more?
I mean, I think number one, just bring it up in a consultation. And I think what I've heard from what Kat's just said is she wanted to know what she can do. And I think in my experience, most people with cancer want to know what they can do, and exercise is something that everyone with cancer can do. And I think, bringing that up in conversation as part of your consultation is really important. And it's also actually a really positive thing to do, because I'm, as an oncologist, I prescribe drugs, and the first time I meet a patient, once I've chatted with them, find out what matters to them, what the symptoms are, etc. We talk about the treatments, and then I go through a long list of side effects, and it's really scary. And it's a horrible way to end a consultation, sign a consent form with these side effects. But you can then follow up with something that's actually quite positive that will undoubtedly make people feel better. So as a healthcare professional, you do need to kind of, I guess, think about how you're going to bring it up. Moving Medicine's got it's a website, it's got some great kind of conversation, like the 2-minute conversation, the 5-minute conversation. So it's got some great suggestions about how you can bring that up. But it is a really positive thing that you can do that can, will help give patients back some sense of control, but also end the consultation on a slightly positive note. And I guess I'd also encourage people to remember that so many people with cancer assume that they need to rest, and actually giving them permission to go outside and move is a really positive thing that will take off a lot of anxiety and weight off their mind, and probably change their perceptions. Yeah, so I think understand the evidence and bring it up in conversation is probably the two things. And I certainly, I think the challenge trial shows that we owe it to patients. Like, it proves we have to have those conversations with everyone who's been given a cancer diagnosis.
I think you make a really good point, because I think in my initial consultation, I brought it up at the end rather than it being brought up to me. So you as an oncologist you obviously are very interested in the exercise side of things as well. But my oncologist was like, yes, of course you need to move. And like, I had someone in here the other day who has been having radiotherapy on their knee and hasn't moved it for 6 weeks. I'm like, okay, but it needs to be.
Good job I asked.
Yeah. So it is about bringing it up. And like you said, we said before about the cliche of exercise as a drug. You're talking about chemotherapy, which is obviously a drug and a treatment, which people need to have. But exercise should have as much importance in a consultation because of the evidence that's there as well as an add-on to the treatment that you're having. So I think it's...
But then I guess coming along with that, it's nice then for healthcare professionals to have somewhere to signpost patients to, because they're not going to have the expertise to tell all the time to go through a structured exercise program.
No,
but there are charities out there. So having a list of places that you can signpost to, I think healthcare professionals will say that makes it easier to have the conversation as well, because you can have the conversation and then point the person into the right direction. Rather than just saying, oh, and by the way, it's great to exercise. Off you go.
Exactly. You have to have the resources to back it up. Yeah. But even like, I know when I was still working in the NHS, we loved the leaflet, and it was a really good way to tell people how many things they could do for their arthritis or something, and exercise is one of them. And you have all the resources on the back. So it's just simple communication to provide the people with the places to look.
The other thing you both are amazing at is the power of advocacy. I think when you're passionate about something and you represent it, and one of the things that I think healthcare professionals as a population are often really active, particularly doctors. But I think sometimes we don't represent that very well, and I've become conscious about trying to leave kind of not very subtle signs around my consulting room so that people know it's a priority in my life. And yeah, whether we can encourage colleagues to do something similar, I don't know, but yeah, I'm sure you guys do that, and certainly, you are doing that, so which is pro. Just to finish, it would be really interesting, just if you guys had any final thoughts or reflections, or just something that you wanted the listener to take away from this. I kind of putting you both on the spot. I'm going to fill time just briefly and then hand over. Lucy, I'll hand over to you. Yeah, perfect.
No, I guess this is for a healthcare professional. So one of my, in the early days of 5KUA, there was an incredible lady called Sue, and she's died now, but she was 70 or 71, I think, and she'd been diagnosed with bowel cancer that had spread to her liver. She had never run in her life. And when she was in hospital having a bowel cancer surgery, she saw the flyer for 5KUA and she joked to her family. She said, when I get out of here, I'm going to do that. And her family like, you don't run. And she's 70 or 71. Anyway, she got out of hospital. She could hardly walk to the toilet. She came to 5K. She walked a bit of it. And she came back and she came back. And she built up to running. And eventually she set the target of, if I break 35 minutes, I'm going to get in the river naked. And she got in the river naked. But I've got this amazing video of her saying, when people ask me how I am, I don't talk about the bad stuff. I tell them I've started running. And she's a lady that you would never assume would want to be told to exercise. She's 70. She's just been diagnosed with stage 4 cancer. Exercise was not part of her life. Yet actually what it turned into was her crutch during the years that she was living with cancer. And for me, that's kind of, whenever I've struggled with the charity, and growing a charity it's a lot of work and it's stressful at times, I very often come back to Sue. And there are so many Sues out there who could get so much joy and medical benefits if they just were given the information about the benefits of exercise. So that's my little anecdote that I'll end on.
Thanks, Lucy. How about you, Kat?
I think kind of following on from what Lucy's just said, a lot of it, I'm a big believer in knowledge is power. So if you can equip people with the knowledge that doing something can help them, again, going back to signposting and things, then it gives them the power to try it. That makes sense. It's, again, like, I think permission has been mentioned a lot. It's that permission. You are allowed to move. You're not going to harm yourself. Moving doesn't mean running a marathon. Moving doesn't mean doing something really extreme. It can be walking. It can be anything. So it's that permission to do it, but also arming people with the knowledge that they can do it and should do it.
Permission and empowerment. Good note to end on. Thanks, guys. Hi, it's Callum. I really hope you enjoyed the episode. We are so grateful to the British Society of Lifestyle Medicine for their support in producing these podcasts. And we wholeheartedly share their vision of transforming healthcare and levelling health inequalities through lifestyle medicine. If you want to find out more, please head to bslm.org.uk. Although catering for healthcare professionals, this podcast is for everyone. If you enjoyed it, please share it. And we love hearing from you, so do reach out. Thanks for listening.